Well, this is the first pen, or the last pen I bought rather, at the Commonwealth Pen Show. So I will show you my typical purchases at pen shows based on the particular purchases of this show, this particular show. So this video is entitled Pen Show Swag. So this is a Noodler's Boston Safety Pen. This is a brand new pen manufactured a few months ago. And this is a pen that Nathan Tardif is putting out that will write with India ink. And I'm buying this and trying this out to see if it will work for my fellow artists and calligraphers that like to use ink that they can do watercolors on top of which they will do watercolors. So the jury's out on this. It seems to be fine so far, but I'll give it the old Per Gustafson test. So that's something. I normally don't buy brand new pens at a pen show because I collect old ones, but this one is an exception. This is typical of what I buy at pen shows, and also somewhat typical. I bought this little green velvety looking pen tray to make my pen sales look fancier. I buy pens at the Boston Pen Show generally from two people, but I also find, if I can't find these two particular people at a pen show, I will find their mate, their doppelganger, because this is just what I like. So this lot, for the most part, this was an exception to that. But I'll just talk about this, get this out of the way. This is a Conklin Endura in wood grain, and it's missing a nib, and it has a crack in the cap, and it's missing a clip. But I love this wood grain pattern, or wood grain colors. But I ended up selling all of the Enduras that I had of this particular color to one person one year. It was one of the very few times I said, okay, I don't want any of these anymore. And the reason I said that was I felt that Waterman Ripples, as well as Wahl Eversharp wood grains, were perfectly good examples of this particular mixture of red and black hard rubber. But I bought this one because it wasn't very much money, $20, and I'm able, I think, to use this for one of my Franken pen bodies at some point, which I would use at my desk, and it would be perfectly fine. The cap doesn't really stay on very well because of the crack here. It doesn't. If I hold it shut, it threads perfectly fine, but when I release the pressure, it doesn't really screw on very well. So it's not a pen I would ever take out with me on my person. So I'm happy to have it not have a clip, and I'll put a nice gold dip pen nib in this, and it'll happily reside here, I hope, on my desk. So all these pens came from Jeff Krasner, and Jeff has a very exciting little box, or in this case he has about 3 or 4 boxes at his table that he calls project pens, or Schleg, or special bargains or something. Anyone that has a big box or small box of junk at a pen show, I love going through it, because chances are there's a part I need and I'll find it there. Or they'll have a lot of crappy pens like these. These are all first tier and non-second tier. These are third tier pen manufacturers that had really bad, nibs in them, and just they're not bad. They're not very well made, but they provide perfectly good bodies for my dip pen nib transplants. So these are all going to be Franken pens at some point. Maybe not this one because I didn't realize this is missing its top. But even that wouldn't bother me because, again, I don't take Franken pens out with me. I tend to just dip them. But anyway, you've heard me talk about these again and again. So these are Franken pens. So I bought these from Jeff, and I also buy these sorts of things from anyone that has these large off-brand pens, and then I can put a nice good nib in them. This one was a slightly fancier pen that will be turned into well, I've already put a nice nib in it. It didn't have a nib. In this case, Jeff had a slightly better, quote, junk box. And some of the pens, even the junky ones, were $50 and higher. I didn't choose to get those. So I got this one, though. I did get this one, and it's a European pen. Feels like a duofold. I put a Charles Ingersoll nib in it, which is very, very flexible. A little fragile, though, but it's fine in this pen for the moment. I may upgrade the nib at some point. But I like the little attempt at copying the Wahl Eversharp rollerball clip. It looks like a workhorse, but it's very sturdy. It's a very sturdy pen. It's called a Grand Prix European pen from 1937, I think. This is a Sheaffer ladies pen, which I don't have this one, I found out. It does have a crack in the threads. I may have a barrel that I can put in to make it a perfectly good pen, but right now it looks nice in the drawer. It has the nib that came with it isn't all that sexy, but in fact it's not. Is it the right nib? Yes, it is the right nib. It's a 530, which meant a number 5 nib guaranteed for 30 years, as opposed to their lifetime thing. I did buy this also from Jeff, and I asked him why it was in his junk drawer, and he said he hadn't fixed it. And he hadn't fixed it, and one of the problems with it was the nib, the section broke when I was trying to take it apart, and whether Jeff knew that or not, I don't know. And I'm sure if he knew it, Jeff is very good about pointing out the flaws. He pointed out the crack in the threads here, and he did say that this one wasn't working. But I have put this nib and section in it, and it's fine. The gold Triumph nib that was originally on this wasn't quite correct. It's right here. And I think this is what Jeff was pointing out. This is not the correct thing, so that's why he didn't fix it. But anyway, I fixed it now, and it's fine. And then I bought these pencils from him, and I was a little surprised that I paid a little bit more than I thought I would, but that's okay. This one, these are what these pens normally look like. These are AutoPoint pens, but this is sort of a fancy AutoPoint pen because it has this little gold scallopy business going on there, which made me smile. It also has this little gold thing back here, which doesn't make me smile quite as much, but it's okay. But I like the Frank-Tite alloyed iron label on it. And this one is another one that has, it's a Evansville College, but I like the hard rubber patterning on this one. So these were sort of whims. I didn't need any of these pens, but I got them anyway. The better pens, or the pens that didn't have the flaws in it as much, but I bought these from another guy who generally has good prices on pens, but usually the pens have some flaw, which makes the prices understandable. But they're still good prices. This one is 61 that's missing its little inlaid gold arrow, but that doesn't make it write any less well. So that was now mine, and I'll find a good buyer for that doesn't mind the arrow missing. This one is a perfectly fine pen. It has a crack in the cap somewhere, but it also has very bad brassing, which doesn't bother me. Neither one of those things. Teeth marks here, teeth marks there. They match the same teeth marks. So again, it's a cosmetic flaw which doesn't bother me and may not bother the person that might buy this from me one day. This one has sort of discoloring, which is quite common for these pens, but that's really the only problem with it. So this pen and this pen are the pens that really don't have any problems that I bought from that guy. Blue Parker Duofold Jr. with a nice sort of rubbery nib. You know, the clip is a little bent. I might be able to fix that. The color is a little dark, but that doesn't bother me. But this is the one I bought from him that I really quite find charming. It has not a very good job of engraving, a homemade engraving, May to November 1923, and then it has this pattern, sort of paisley pattern stuff going on there, and that was added along at the same time this was added. I'm almost positive, though I don't know, because I don't have a time machine to go back there, but I think this had two initials on it, and the person who maybe owned it and wanted to give to someone for maybe they visited between May and November in 1923, and here's a souvenir of your visit to America or whatever to someone. I don't know what this means, but I think to make this less personalized, they put a little pattern over the original initials. So it has a story. The other story I had was that it was it was a darker story, which I don't need to go into, but that was my first thought, that there was a murder was part of this story, but I don't think that's the case. I think it was someone giving someone a pen they owned, but they didn't want to have their initials on them, and they just sort of erased their engraved initials the best they could by adding a pattern to it and putting something up here to commemorate something that happened between those months in 1923. Has a very nice nib. The flaw that was labeled on this thing said that there was a tooth missing in the feed. Yep, there's a tooth missing right there. But again, it doesn't bother the way it writes too much or at all, and it has a very nice nib, so yay. Another pen I got was this one, and I bought this from an extremely handsome man, not a young man, but an older man, an older gentleman, charming 62-year-old man by the name of Per Gustafsson. Yes, you got that right. I bought this from myself. I went through all sorts of anxiety, which I do at every show, and I take pens, I fix pens, I put pens in my sale bin, and then as I'm showing pens to customers or would-be customers, I have second thoughts, and I hand them the pen. It's too late for me to take it out of their hands and say this isn't for sale, but in my mind I'm willing them, please, please, please don't buy that pen. Please put it back down, and I'll put it in my pocket where it really belongs. So, I did this not with just this pen, but I'm glad that I still have it, because not that I ever like to write the way that this pen writes. This is really loud and sort of blobby, but every once in a while I have to do a job that requires this sort of writing, and yes, I have other pens that can do that same thing, but I'm happy to have this back in my collection. And this represents about a dozen other pens that I decided to keep as well. Or I'm happy that I didn't sell, I'll put it that way. I took a lot of pens out of my personal collection to try to sell, and I didn't sell them. I didn't really show them very much, but I ended up happy that I still have them. The last three pens here are pens that I bought that were originally owned by Susan Worth, who is a woman who died recently and was a fixture at every single pen show, though she didn't come to Boston for the last couple of years because we have a one-day show and she requires at least 2 days to do her business with people. She sells pens to writers, and she wants the writers to go home and tell all of their friends about this amazing woman selling amazing pens at a pen show. And when she doesn't have that word of mouth activity going on, she doesn't think she can do her job, I think, as well on a one-day show. Well, she died with her boots on, as it were. She was on her way home from a pen show and had a aneurysm as she got home and was unloading the car. And the curtains for her, and she's sorely missed. She normally sold pens that had broad stub nibs. That was her claim to fame, and she also sold pens that were mainly Parkers and mainly pens that were more modern than I normally like. But in her collection she had this pen, and it's a Demonstrator Eversharp Symphony pen. And this pen, not this exact one, but this model pen was the very first pen I bought from the company I now own. So when I saw this as part of her estate, I decided I had to get it, because I can now show my customers, would-be customers, how levers work and how pens with sacks fill with this invisible Demonstrator pen that was owned originally by Mrs. James Cooper. And I bet Mrs. James Cooper was a pen repair person or a pen salesman somewhere in the world, because Eversharp, this is the only Eversharp Demonstrator I've ever seen of this particular model, of this particular era. And I just have a feeling that normally they only supplied them for pen dealers to show their customers how the pen works. And so this does, and this shows how the Eversharp lever system works. And this is the same lever system that Skylines use, and Skyline pens are one of my favorite pens to sell. Symphony pens, on the other hand, are not my favorites. They're a little bit flimsier. But anyway, so this pen I got from her. But she was a Parker lady, and I did get this set, which isn't quite a set. This pencil belongs to the larger version of this pen, but this is the pen that I have that will remind me of Susan. I never bought a pen from her. Sold her lots of pens, but I never bought a pen from her because mainly her pens were very modern, more modern than I like. But this is a pen that I can imagine that she loved. She loved Parker. She knew all about Parker's history and stuff. And this pen is a Parker Imperial Vac, which was the love child of the this pen. This pen, well, it's not a love child, it's the missing link. This pen and the Parker 51. In between these two pens came this. And it's clearly the obvious child, of these two parents. And this should have had, this was the blind cap that came on it, but it's not the one that belongs on it. It's supposed to have one that looks like this. And I just happen to have one that fits. It doesn't fit exactly, neither did this one, but it fits close enough for my uses. And maybe it did belong to a different pen of this type. It's only slightly wider in one spot, so I can maybe file that down or look for another thing. So now I've got something that will remind me of Susan. I probably should try to find a nice big stub moppy nib to go in it, but this was the nib that came in it, so I'll leave it the way it is. I don't think Susan would mind, though, if I put a big stub moppy nib in it, because she was sort of a stub. She was kind of short, kind of big, always covered in ink, like I am. I wouldn't necessarily call her moppy in the sense of her personality, but she was a force to be reckoned with. She was sort of like a female version of Jackie Gleason. Not quite as loud, almost. She was, yeah, I'll just call her the female version of Jackie Gleason. I think that's almost right. People that know Susan Wirth can come up with their descriptors that might work better. But anyway, so here's the thing I will use to remind me of Susan. So that's essentially it. I sold a lot of pens to users, and one of the things that there was only one person that bought a pen from me that had something to say about the cosmetic thing. Most people understood they were buying pens. They were essentially buying nibs that happened to be in holders that looked like fountain pens, meaning they weren't buying it from here back. They were buying it from here forward. And only one person was buying a Skyline from me, and he pointed out one little tiny flaw that it had where the threads weren't quite working on the cap. And there was a little gap here that he didn't like. And I said, well, okay, let's fix that. I offered it to him for less money, but that still bothered him. And so I found a different cap and essentially upgraded it to where it should have been. I didn't notice the little threading issue, so he paid the price that I was asking, but I fixed the problem by putting a different cap on it. And he's very happy, I hope, with a very flexible Eversharp Skyline with a flexible nib for drawing. I think he was going to use it for drawing. So, but almost every other customer I had bought the pen based on the nib and not on the pretty color, not on the pretty finish, not on the rarity of the model. They bought it because of the way it wrote. And those are my customers. There were other people that sell pens based on how pretty they are and how rare they are. And I'm glad that they have buyers, they have sellers for their needs. And they go to other people. They know, at a pen show, I watch the people come in and they make a beeline toward the person they know and the person they trust. Not so much trust, that's not quite the right word, but the person that they know who sells the kinds of pens they like. And the relationship they have with that collector is based on years of dealing with that person. So they go right to their table and they might spend all of their money there and they might walk out the door without going to anyone else's table. There are a lot of people that go directly to Nathan Tardif and Noodler's Ink to buy, and they stand in line waiting to buy the inks or waiting to have Nathan Tardif himself bless their pens or whatever. And then there's other people that go directly to the person that has the very most expensive and rarest pens, because they know that it's only that dealer or those 2 or 3 dealers that have the pens of the rarefied, that breathe the rarefied atmosphere of that their taste requires. And they go to them, and that's great. Those are never the people that go to me. And people come to me do not want rarefied taste. They want a nice, good working pen. And they come to me because they know that I know I'm a good pen whisperer or something. I can provide them with a pen that is best suited for their hands, because I understand how they're drawing and how they're writing. Other people do that too, but I think I'm among the best, among the better ones that can do that. Because I've done this so long and I know how to draw and I know how to do calligraphy to a degree, and I know what left-handed people like, because of the years that I've spent selling pens to the user. I know that there are the people that sell very highly collectible pens. They know the facts that can help them sell a pen to a collector. They will say, this is one of the rarest Parkers because it was made between this year and that year and it has this imprint on it and things like that, and that's great. I wouldn't know that at all, and I'm not interested in those things. But luckily, other people know those things and can help those customers. So again, I sell them to the artists and the calligraphers. This is how I usually start my spiel when someone comes up to my table. And my table doesn't have trays like this with beautiful pens in it. It has a big ledger book with just scribbles all over it and pens sort of strewn left and right. And I try to make myself look pretty once in a while, but it doesn't feel right. And my customers come up to me and they look at my table and well, where's Pierre? And then they look up, oh, it is you, because my table is too neat. So I'm a little messy, but people expect that. But my spiel to someone that comes to my table that is new to me and I don't recognize, I say, I sell pens mainly to the calligrapher and the artist, but I'll take your money too. And people giggle with that, and I'll ask them immediately, I'll say, what kind of pens do you like? And they'll tell me, and then I'll say, thank you, but what I meant to ask was, what kind of nibs do you like? And then I'm talking their language. sometimes if they answer, I'm looking for a, a Schaefer snorkel in purple, I'll say, I'll point them to the only person in the room that might have such a thing. But most of the time, they'll say, I'm sort of new to fountain pens and I'm interested in buying my first vintage pen. And I'll say, okay, well, what kind of nib do you think you'd like? And I'll show them a pen that will write exactly like it, and I'll say, well, what you got there is a Waterman No. 2 flexible nib, and wander around the room. You might find one that you like better, but at least now you know what you can ask for. And so I help people out that way, and I'm very good at matchmaking. I'll go around the room and I'll find a pen that I know someone else will want, and I'll grab it and I'll say I'll be right back, and I'll bring it over to that other dealer or that customer that's somewhere else in the room, and I'll say this is what you want, and it belongs in this. It's over at this table, and I'm happy to play matchmaker. I suppose I could buy the pen and bring it to my table and mark it up, which often happens at pen shows. I've done it in the past, but I'd much prefer to just be the matchmaker, send the customer to the seller. So anyway, blah blah blah. I'm not drawing. I know you probably wanted me to draw, and here I'm just doodling. So let's see if Nathan's pen is working. It's been sitting here for a while. Let me try to uncap it and see if it works. This again has thick ink, and I learned that I have to really pull down the nib very slowly. So is it going to work? There it goes. It's working. So far it's good. Let's see if I can pull this down slowly so it doesn't spit up. There we go. Well, good. Well, I hope this works, Nathan. Better work. Well, I hope it works. Doesn't clog. There you go. Bye.